Hi there, everybody. My name is Christian, and I am one of your classmates in this awesome class called Identity and Justice, which is taught by Dr. Sebti. And today I would like to talk to you all about my journey as a person with a disability and someone who's a disability advocate. And before I begin, I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Sebti for this opportunity to share. I just I just think that's so thoughtful of you, and I am really honored and blessed to be able to have this opportunity to share the little bit that I know um, about our field and what makes it so special, and what I've been able to experience within it. And so, as you'll see on the right, this is a photo of me, and I'll just give you a brief overview about me. I have multiple disabilities, and one of which that I want to highlight today is called cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is a physical disability, and according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it is the most common motor disability in childhood. And motor refers to the way that we move. So there are different types of motor. There's fine motor and there's gross motor skills. And fine motor refers to anything that you do that is a very intricate movement with your fingers. And so, this one example of a skill where you would need to have good fine motor skills would be to do an arts and craft activity or to play piano. And gross motor skills refers to the way that we move. Yeah, and it refers to coordination. So, despite its name, it's not about being gross. It is about um, you being able to move and do what you got to do each day. And but for people with disabilities, uh, we may not be the most coordinated all the time. And I know for cerebral palsy, my muscle tone is varied. So in my legs, for example, they are spastic. So I have what's called spastic cerebral palsy. So if you were to look at me walking and compare that to a non-disabled person, you might notice a slight tightness in the way that I walk. It might look slightly unnatural, or not as relaxed or agile compared to a non-disabled person. And also, cerebral palsy impairs what are called visual spatial skills or abilities. So I have blurry vision in my left eye along with a cataract, which means that when I walk outside in the sun, I shut my left eye really hard like this, like a pirate. Um, so this way, I don't have to have the bright sun shining in my eye. Um, and because my right eye does not have a cataract, I can keep that one open. And I can see well out of my right eye, fortunately. I have friends who are not as fortunate and they have low vision. So, disability is, there's quite a variety of disabilities that can exist. But for me, it's just my left eye that's blurry. And the term spatial refers to any activity that you do in what's called space. So this whole environment here is called space. So it's not referring to the solar system. But I guess if we were up in the solar system, maybe it would apply. But right here on planet Earth, it's just about the environment that we are in. And so vi visual spatial skills refer to anything, literally any life skill that you can think of. So for example, some things that might be difficult for me include like when I was younger, I would have trouble um, with uh, well, okay, here's a better example. For those of you that have older equipment that you use around your house to do housework, one of the things that you might be familiar with is how vacuums from years ago, like decades ago, they would actually have a cord that you would plug into the wall and you would use to vacuum, right? So one night I was vacuuming around my house, and when I was done, my dad asked me to wrap up the vacuum cord in a circular fashion, since the cord itself goes in a circle. So number one, um, I did not notice that the cord went in a circular fashion. So visual spatial deficits mean that someone may not notice how something works. So that's number one, which then makes the skill itself more difficult. And so, but okay, understanding that the cord goes in a circle, I then have to use my hands and my fingers to then wrap the cord. So I don't know in, intuitively how to wrap this cord, and so my dad had to show me. Um, Another example could be a grocery bag. So you know how some paper grocery bags, right? If it's like a brown bag from, um, for those of you who may shop at Whole Foods or um, Giant or any store like that, you know that there's like brown paper bags and there's a rectangular portion that's more sturdy on the bottom of the bag to make it so that the bag can hold food, right? And so what we do in my house is in order to save space with grocery bags and in order for us to have bags to use to carry things, we save the brown bags. And so what we do is we fold up the brown bags to conserve space where we put them. But recently, I did not know how to fold up the bag using the creases on it to know how and where it was folded. So my dad had to spend 15 minutes showing me how to do that skill that for most people would come really easily and intuitively. So it's a visual spatial skill because I had to look at the bag and then I had to manipulate the bag in space. I had to manipulate it in the environment. Um, and so to summarize, cerebral palsy is a physical disability, which is the most common motor disability in childhood, according to the CDC, and it impairs fine motor, gross motor, and visual spatial skills, along with speech as well. So throughout this presentation, you may notice that I will have trouble saying certain words or phrases, and I may do what speech therapists call a secondary behavior, which is I might make a face as I'm speaking, and it may look like I'm sad or upset or angry, but I'm not sad, upset, or angry. In fact, I'm quite happy. Um, but I am trying to speak. So I usually say that to folks, so then this way they know. Um, so that's a broad overview of one of my major disabilities. And so I'm going to start this off by describing to you, before we get there, how I came to terms with my disability identity. It took me 17 years to do so. And so one day at 17 years old, I was outside running with my physical therapist, and both she and my mom were saying to me um, at different points, and I remember my physical therapist saying to me, Christian, if you start publicly identifying as someone with a disability, guess what? Your whole universe is going to open up. And she used that phrase, your whole universe is going to open up. And so she was right. And my mom was right. And I was hesitant at first. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to publicly identify as disabled because as someone with mild disabilities, I can camouflage with non-disabled people. Even though I don't often feel like I belong in non-disabled settings, I can I can at least appear like I'm non-disabled. And so for a long time, I kind of appreciated that I could do that. I'm not gonna lie. Like I liked being considered non-disabled. And isn't that interesting how because society is built around non-disabled people, internalized ableism can be part of who you are. And perhaps that was true for me. But I think at that time, I really just didn't have any other awareness of my disability identity other than it being a medical condition. But once I started to embrace who I was, I began to shift my understanding from what's called the medical model, which is viewing disability as a condition where you see the doctor for help, to a social model understanding of how disability can be a social identity. And it can pave the way for me to access community with 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 other people with disabilities. So when I began to identify as disabled, my whole world did change. And not only did I come to terms with accepting who I was, and but I began to listen to other people's stories and journeys, and I felt part of community, and that really made a whole world of difference. So the first disability advocacy experience that I had was at this church that I used to attend, where they had a disabilities ministry, and they called it a special needs ministry. And the reason why I have special needs in quotes is because special needs is what we would call a euphemism. A euphemism is a term that is used to cover up or disguise another term. In this case, it's being used to cover up the term disability. And I want us all to know that that it is fully okay to use the term disability. It is not something that you have to f find a different word to use. You don't have to say differently abled. Please don't say differently able. You don't have to say special needs. Um, because if you think about it, all of us have needs, right? All of us as human beings need support and care and love. And we all need to feel included and like we belong and that we do belong. And so I believe that despite folks' good intentions um, about it, I think we don't need to use the term special needs. But nevertheless, I was part of this ministry at 17 years old, which was around the time that I was discovering who I was as a disabled person. And what is interesting is we had a variety of people of all ages and of various disabilities. So the ministry served children who were like young children all the way up to adult age. And we had some adolescents as well. Teenagers, we had all kinds of folks. And there were two classrooms. One was for the younger kids and one was for the older adults or teenagers. And they were a really tight-knit community. And these classrooms were separate from the main church service because the church wanted to provide support, like specialized support for these folks that had significant disabilities, or what's called high support needs is the term. The challenge, though, was that this ministry was segregated. It was not integrated as part of the larger non-disabled community in this church. And so the families and like all the parents, they got to go to the regular church service. And so, in a way, this ministry was a form of respite for them because these parents were hard at work, being caregivers for their children or for their adult children. So on one hand, it was good for them, but on the other hand, for the adult children, I would have liked to have seen more effort at fully including and fully integrating them into the larger non-disabled adult church community. But at age 17, I did not think like this. At age 17, I I just thought that this was normal, to have a ministry called special needs and to have people segregated in classrooms apart from everyone. I did not even consider how maybe we don't have to have it that way. But the positive thing that came out of it was that I knew as I was playing religious music, which by the way, this music that we would play was very childlike in nature. So that worked for the children. But for the adult children, I wonder whether some of those adults, including those who had higher support needs, I wonder what they felt about this childlike music that we were playing and childlike instruction that we were giving them and childlike activities that we were doing with them. I wonder whether they found it pleasant or whether they found it annoying. Because imagine if any of us were sitting in this class and and in, and instead of learning college level material like we signed up for, imagine if this class was at a kindergarten level. And imagine if that was justified because we're disability studies majors. That's that might have been how these folks felt, although it seemed like most were enjoying it and most were benefiting from this level of instruction. So anyway, I knew though that in this ministry that I wanted to work in this field of disability studies for the rest of my life. I knew that there was nothing else I would rather do. And I went home and I told my mom this, but because I was playing music, I thought that I wanted to be a music therapist, which was a music therapist is someone who plays music for people with disabilities or other medical conditions to work on achieving non-musical goals. So maybe that could include improvements in their fine and gross motor skills or in their behavioral skills or another element of who they are. And but later on, I discovered disability advocacy. And I discovered disability advocacy at my community college, Bucks County Community College, where I was fortunate to earn an associate's degree in music. And so I started in August of 2019 and I graduated in May of 2024. So it took me 5 years to earn my associate's degree. And one of the reasons for the delay was the COVID-19 pandemic. So when the pandemic struck, I was unable to take in-person music classes um, for the various ensembles. And so I was unable to graduate on time for that reason. Um, but nevertheless, it's okay because I was able to explore my own identity and what I wanted to do with this degree. And shortly before graduation, I created and there's supposed to be two words that say, I created a neurodiversity affirming music lesson series, which gives a comprehensive understanding of music theory and jazz piano from a neurodiversity affirming perspective. Because growing up, I was taking piano lessons and I was learning, but I didn't quite understand everything in the best way, where I could apply what I learned to a band setting. And so I created a music lesson series for people who are neurodivergent like me as well. That's one of my other disabilities. And this way, folks can learn in a way that works for them. So, and speaking of which, I have a YouTube channel where I feel fortunate to be able to post original songs about disability and life because I'm a singer-songwriter. Um, and I also have my neurodiversity affirming music lesson series. If you'd like to watch, feel free to give them a listen. And so I was able to discover disability advocacy through the Disability Pride Club at Bucks, which was a student group for young people with disabilities and allies, which included non-disabled people as well, to come together and grow in friendship and just to be able to share their stories and journeys of disability. And I started out as the secretary for one semester and then the vice president um, because the 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 individual that was running the club asked me because we were friends. He would bounce ideas back and forth for the club, like sh should we do this bake sale? When should we host a meeting? Should we do this activity? Can you hang up flyers about the club around the college? Things like that. And so that's what I would do as vice president. And then I was fortunate to be asked by the individual running the club if I wanted to take over as president. And I'm still kind of surprised because growing up, I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And so naturally, because I was a more laid back sh and like just I was chill and I wasn't interested in leading anyone. And so I would just follow others around. Particularly I would follow non-disabled people around everywhere and just do as I was told. And so when someone asked me if I wanted to be president of a group of college students, I just like it's so hard to believe even to this day, but I said yes. And so I was president for 2 years. And but that's just a title. That's not really important. What was important was that um, each young person in that group for those 2 years um, was given the opportunity because I wanted to give people the opportunity to share about their disability journeys if they felt comfortable doing it. And what's interesting is that some people were comfortable doing it, but others were not, and that's okay. But as they heard other people sharing their stories about their identities, they became more comfortable. And so it really was a special and very unique thing. And we all felt so connected to each other as friends. And it was just really, really awesome. And to this day, I feel really blessed that I was able to be part of it. It wasn't about me being president. It was about every person coming to an understanding that, wow, as a person with a disability, I have quite a story to share, and I can feel like I belong somewhere. So I felt that way, and so did everyone else. It was just really awesome. One of the other things I was fortunate to do was I founded the Peyton Hart Project initiative at Bucks County Community College, which began as a club, and then it turned into an initiative that is now run by the Bucks Psychology Club, which is cool. So I started this initiative in October 2020, and that was because one day I walked into the Bucks library and I looked on the front desk, and there was a flyer. There was a flyer for this nonprofit organization called the Peyton Hart Project. And um, it was done in honor of a 13-year-old little boy named Peyton James. And this little boy was in middle school. And if you read about Peyton James, um, folks will say, like, he was such an adorable little boy. And it would have been hard to guess that he was in such distress. But one day, due to intense bullying at his middle school, he came home one day, he went into his bedroom, he closed the door, and he had something set up where he could take his life, where he died by suicide. And when I read that as part of the flyer, I felt like, wow, I don't want anyone to feel that way. So it it was moving to me. Um, like it's struck me as like, wow, I that's really sad. And so I contacted the professor that was listed on the flyer, and I read about the Peyton Hart Project and I online, and I wanted to do something to, raise awareness for suicide prevention and mental health. And so what we were able to do is um, this was during the pandemic. So um, the main thing that the Peyton Heart Project is known for is making hearts in honor of Peyton James. These hearts are often crocheted by people. In fact, at Bucks, there was a crochet club at the library where these older women would come and they would actually make these hearts out of crochet together. And then what they do is they put what's called a tag inside of the heart, or like there's a hole that like you can attach the tag to. And the tag has a message on it, something like you matter, your life matters. Like there's a variety of sayings on these tags. And what the project encourages people to do is you can buy these hearts from them that are already made, and you can put them in a basket. And you can just put the basket anywhere as long as it's okay with people to, put the basket somewhere. So uh, I know that, like, if you walk into a Starbucks coffee shop, you might see a basket of Peyton hearts if you look around. And anyone can take these, like, anyone can just take a heart. It's free. And I think that this is really special because someone taking a heart could save their life. It could save their life to know that they matter and that these tags also have contact information on them for the suicide prevention hotline, among other things, resources for support. And so, but because we were virtual during the pandemic, I thought, gee, there's got to be a way to make a virtual heart. So I wanted to research to figure that out. So I created a virtual heart making method. And I told my professor this, and she thought that was really cool. And so she then, like, we both reached out to the project. And I had said that I was fortunate to come up with an idea to make these virtual hearts. And I made a tutorial of how to make the hearts, which was then posted on their website. And so I was able to meet the founders of the nonprofit this way, and also getting other students from Bucks to make the hearts. And um, yeah, so in addition to that, I reached out to the Bucks County Suicide Prevention Task Force because there was another social work professor that she actually founded the Bucks County Suicide Prevention Task Force. And so I thought that was cool. So I reached out to her and I said, do you want to um, do something? Like, and eventually what happened is I was able to invite a social worker f from the task force to give what was called a question, persuade, and refer, or QPR training. Question, persuade, and refer is a program where they teach you what to do if someone is about to die by suicide or is considering it for real. And you can get certified in responding to people in this way. So we did a virtual QPR training, and QPR training only lasts, I think it's like 2 hours, and then you're certified. And so one student who was in a social work class I was taking, because back then I had no idea that disability studies even existed as a major. One of the students was, she said to the class and to this professor that they were on the phone with a friend of theirs who was considering dying by suicide, and that this student was able to persuade her not to die by suicide because of what she learned in this QPR training. So one life was saved because of this QPR training. So I will always remember that because this work that we do, it matters. And so I was able to get this certification for QPR. And in addition, I was fortunate to join the Student Government Association at Bucks, where I served on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee with other friends of mine from Disability Pride Club. And one of the things that we were very passionate about was making sure that Bucks was an inclusive place for people of all backgrounds, especially religious backgrounds. There was a street preacher that would come onto our campus and say very hateful things toward members of other religions. And we wanted to do something so that people felt included and not like bothered by this street preacher. Um, our efforts were cut short due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but that was something we wanted to do. The ironic part was that the COVID-19 pandemic made it so that this street preacher did not come back. So I guess in a way that worked out. But I don't like how other people with COVID-19, like what happened was unfortunate throughout the whole pandemic. But I guess you could say that some things happened as a result of the pandemic, even though the pandemic was very sad to experience and many people died as a result. There were some elements of society that shifted, and that was one of them, that this street preacher did not come back. And so that was the main thing that I was involved with there, along with, oh, and that's the other side. So in addition, I was fortunate to serve on the Student Affairs Committee, and a lot of these things came about because I was fortunate to meet people and develop relationships with them. I forgot to mention with the Peyton Hart project, it was because I had spoken to this professor who then gotten me who had gotten me in touch with the Peyton Hart project ambassador. And then the ambassador got me in touch with someone else, which I will talk more about that later on. And so um, a lot of these things came about because I was just enjoying my college experience and meeting people. And they would invite me to things. And the the student affairs committee was one of them, where I was fortunate to give the college recommendations on its use of technology. So, you know how when you log into anything William Patterson related, you have to type in your username and your password and then type in the Duo Mobile code as part of two-factor authentication to log in, and how we have the WP portal where all the links are. I wanted the college to create a website or some kind of thing that was similar to WP Portal, where you have all your links in one place. And so they said actually that the college was working on doing that, but it wasn't available when I was on the committee, but now it is, which is awesome. So sometimes advocacy takes time, and um, soon enough you'll see things happen. In addition, I was asked by a friend of mine to be on the Bucks County Community College Foundation Board, which the foundation board was really cool because um, it's basically, well, it is the board of directors for the the college's foundation, and I was their student representative. So my role was to advocate on behalf of the student body in terms of what young people wanted to see the college do at the foundation. And the foundation helps people with various scholarships and other initiatives to make sure that people have the resources and support that they need to be successful academically. And they also work closely with alumni relations to connect with graduates, and um, they also do scholarships for people. So if somebody wants to donate money to the college, they can turn that into a scholarship in which which they can apply to. And so I served on an informal scholarship committee for a former Disability Pride Club member who unfortunately passed away at 21 years old. He was young and he was a friend of mine, and all of us miss him to this day. And I'm still in touch with his father. And what was great was that when he passed away, his father took his place in the club with attending on his behalf, which was a really beautiful thing. I mean, he never took his place, but what I meant to say was that he would attend his father would attend meetings um, and be present there since his son was not able to be, which I just thought was really beautiful. And so the whole club got to know his father too. And now I remain in touch with him. And so now there's a scholarship in my friend's honor, which I thought was really, really awesome. And so, yeah, the foundation was involved with that. They also got us a plaque in his honor. So you can so we put a sign on the campus saying that we remember him. And um, so, yeah, the foundation can also assist with those sort of things. And so, as part of joining the Disability Pride Club, I then learned about this nonprofit called Disability Equality Education, or D. Um, and I learned about this nonprofit because there was a community member that would join us sometimes at these club meetings. And so I got to know him a little bit. He's actually a very well-known disability activist. And so that was awesome. And so that was the very first nonprofit that I have ever joined as a board member. And I am still fortunate to be on the board to this day. As part of the board, I sought out a proclamation from Governor Wolf's office. Governor Tom Wolf was a former governor in Pennsylvania, and I filled out a form on his website to have him issue a proclamation for Disability Action Month in October of 2021, and he granted it, which I just thought was so cool. That was my first, um, I guess, big advocacy endeavor. And it was really easy too. I just filled out his form, and then it just arrived in the mail, which was amazing. Uh, I was also fortunate to submit congressional testimony for the bipartisan PA Disability Inclusive Curriculum Act. Now, to be clear, there is a distinction here in that I was doing this as an advocate. And so, with nonprofit organizations, you have to be careful in that you are only advocating for things, not lobbying for things. I was not a lobbyist, and neither were any of my colleagues, to my knowledge. We were all just advocating for the passage of this bipartisan bill. And so this bill created a pilot program at various school districts like across the state, and we were able to partner with um, well, okay. So the bill created a pilot program for school districts to opt into, where teachers could teach um, their general education courses, whether it's English, history, social studies, whatever, science, and um, they could have disability as part of those lessons, which we have our own curriculum, which as the law has been implemented, it's now part of the what's called the Pennsylvania Department of Education Standards Aligned System, which is its collection of academic standards and resources. So I thought that was really cool. And I was involved with this at the tail end, so I got to see the bill pass. But my colleagues were working on this for 5 years. So legislative advocacy takes a while. And in addition, I was fortunate to do voiceovers in our professional development series on disability inclusive curriculum to train educators on how to use it. And I also reviewed a disability themed lesson to make sure that it was in alignment with our values on the social model. So, yeah, good stuff. And I'll just show you guys a picture. This was from a previous presentation that I gave um, at a statewide conference from our regional governing authority, Patton, or the Pennsylvania Trans the Pennsylvania Technical and Training Assistance Network. Th they have a transition conference every year, and I was giving a speech like alongside another advocate who was the lead on this project. I was talking about our work to pass the bill, And so this is what our promotional banner looked like. And I also included a picture of me at the Disability Pride Parade in Philadelphia, where I was next to a friend of mine. So that was cool. Here's my virtual PA House testimony because I was able to submit the the testimony virtually to the Pennsylvania House Special Education Subcommittee. And over here you can see the final text of Article D included in PA public law, which if you want to read any law that is public, that is, as opposed to private, which means private laws only apply to certain individuals, but public laws apply to everyone. So here's the article of disability inclusive curriculum as part of our laws. And there's the Disability Action Month proclamation and the photo. So now I'm here at William Patterson, seeking a degree in disability studies and taking a variety of awesome courses, including identity and justice, with Dr. Sebti. Dr. Sebti and I met face to face and had a lovely conversation at the College of Education Social here at William Patterson. So that was back in August. So make sure to attend William Patterson's events if you're nearby. I know for me, I take the classes for this major online from my home in the Philadelphia area, so I'm not close to campus. But whenever I can, I am always looking to be part of the campus community. Um, and I was fortunate to be invited as a student ambassador for that event to hopefully get folks interested in starting a disability club here. And so I would love to have you guys join us. You can always reach out to me and we can get connected. One thing I'll say about being far from campus is that I needed transportation that day. And so that was the very first day that I had ever taken a lift to somewhere. So I was growing in my independent living skills by attending the College of Education Social. Now I'm going to switch to volunteering. So I was once a camp counselor at the summer camp called Camp Cranium for folks with brain injuries. And so I was fortunate to serve as a camper 1 year, as well as a camp counselor alongside people of all abilities, including those with brain injuries themselves. So that was cool. One thing I noticed though is that caring for children is not easy when you have a disability, especially one that goes after visual spatial skills. So um, yeah, that was a fun week, but it also was disappointing and kind of sad when I realized that disability was getting in my way for a lot of that week. Also, I was a member of the Young Adults Council at Nami Bucks County, PA, because I had worked at Nami Bucks County, PA as a support group facilitator. And I was interested in joining their Young Adults Council, where I created a mindfulness video for Nami Bucks' social media. I had invited two colleagues of mine from NAMI Bucks to share their stories at the 2023 PA Community of Practice Transition Conference, hosted by PATAN, which is our state's regional governing authority, which regional governance is if you have all these school districts across the state, you have a regional government that kind of oversees all of the school districts and provides them with what's called technical assistance, which technical assistance is a government term that means that these districts can receive resources and consultation from expert educators and other supports to best, in this case, support people with disabilities. So they have a conference every year And my colleagues were able to share about their mental health journeys. And I was fortunate to help organize the In Your Own Voice event at Bucks, where two colleagues were able to share as well. Loud Youth Advocates is a self-advocacy group that I am part of on Facebook for people in Pennsylvania, um, where we have a group of folks with disabilities of various kinds, and we do a lot of advocacy events together, including the patent conferences, and we also work with our state's Developmental Disabilities Council, advocating for things that we need. We did that once. Um, we we did a variety of things. So, Loud Youth Advocates has been a big part of my journey, and they were the ones that introduced me to an organization called Trail, now SAIL. They changed their name, which is Statewide Advocates Influencing Leadership. I'm not sure why that's covered. And so this was an organization that was advocating for a piece of bipartisan legislation called the Family Care Act, which would give people paid family leave from their jobs if their if their if their employer does not offer paid family leave. And this is especially important because folks with disabilities oftentimes are very involved with the medical system. I've spent, you know, a lot of time in the hospital. When I was a young boy, I was driven to the hospital by ambulance. I think it was f 4 times because I was having asthma attacks and not being able to breathe. Um, I've had, various medical things happen over my lifetime. So I think that by having paid family leave, it gives people with disabilities the option and the dignity to still be paid if they need time off from their job to care for their health. And so one of the things that I love to do when I'm advocating is write songs. And as nerdy as this may sound, I wrote a song about this bill, paid family leave, this whole topic as part of advocating for the bill. So um, it's on my YouTube channel if you want to listen. And there was also, as part of Trail, the person in charge said, "Hey, Christian, I have a journalist that wants to learn about this. They want to speak to a self-advocate. Do you want to speak to this journalist?" And I was like, "Sure." And I remember talking to them on the phone, and like that was great. So they actually mentioned me in this article, which was really cool. So, and then next I was able to go to Temple to earn a certificate in their Competence and Confidence Partners in Policy Making, or C2P2 Leadership Development Program. And this is part of, there's multiple states that offer this program, but they all use different names. So for Pennsylvania, as part of our state's University Center on Disability, which, by the way, a University Center on Disability is, um, I think it's either a state or federally mandated thing. I think it's federal, where universities have their own places where people with disabilities can learn about services and resources available and ways to pursue education in advocacy. So I was able to gain a comprehensive understanding of disability policy and advocate alongside with a legislative group too, with my classmates. We were able to advocate um, for PA House Bill 342, which is the Improving College Transition for Students with Disabilities Act, which that bill would make it so that in every college in Pennsylvania, you could give a disability services office at your college your previous 504 plan or your IEP plan, and you could have those accommodations as part of your college experience. And for those that don't know, a 504 plan comes from a piece of legislation called the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And what it does is it gives children the opportunity to have access to various therapies, therapies that I have received, like occupational therapy, which would help people with those fine motor and visual spatial skills that I mentioned earlier, and physical therapy, which helps with the gross motor skills. And if you get an IEP plan, you can get speech therapy. And y you can also, as part of an IEP, get get other services if you need them. Like you can get behavioral therapy, you can get wraparound services, which means that if a child needs to have an aide with them throughout the school day, so you can get a variety of things. And so this bill would make it so that you can take those accommodations and have them in college. Um, I also, for the fun of it, because I love legislation, I wrote legislation for the fun of it to share with the lawmakers' legislative aid to solve what I thought was a problem. And it turns out it wasn't an issue, but I was so thrilled because that legislative aid actually sent my legislation to a group of lawyers in my state capital, and they reviewed my legislation that I wrote to see whether it would be necessary to introduce in the like the Pennsylvania House, which I thought was really cool. And I discussed the intersection of music and public policy by sharing the song about paid family leave. And we were able to tour the PA state capitol and learn about its history. And really, I just loved its architecture. So, um, next, over time, I was able to earn a certificate from Temple in grant writing, where I w was able to study and gain experience with utilizing the components of the grant writing process, including grant prospecting, writing a proposal narrative, creating a logic model to lay out a program's design, and formulating an evaluation plan. And I was able to craft a grant proposal as part of the program. That was a sample proposal. So this is all on my LinkedIn, by the way. I also have a LinkedIn profile if you'd like to check it out. And so like I said, I was able to work at NAMI Bucks as a support group facilitator. I was able to co-facilitate their general peer support group, where people who have a variety of mental health conditions can just share about what they are having difficulty with, and people can share different coping mechanisms and different strategies for ways to cope with their conditions. They also had a night owl group that I facilitated once, and I was able to help restart the OCD group, or the obsessive compulsive disorder group. And for anyone who has OCD, you might think of someone that washes their hands multiple times due to intrusive thoughts of their hands being dirty, but they're not really dirty. But OCD can refer to other things too. So for anyone that has OCD, like me, it is so necessary to have support. Also, I was fortunate to be a consultant and public speaker for the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network, which is a statewide group similar to the Disability Pride Club. And I was able to share about what we were able to do in Disability Pride, and um, I was able to meet a variety of self advocates and some parents, so that was really cool. Um, and yeah, I also worked at the Bucks County Intermediate Unit as a job coach, and an intermediate unit is It's a disability services agency that works with school districts to provide services that the school district does not have. So, for example, an an IU or an intermediate unit could provide um, they could provide mental health counseling. If a school doesn't have it, they could do the traditional PT, OT speech. They could do behavioral therapy. They could bring in a school psychologist. But but I was in a part of the IU that worked with adults. And adults, once they're done school, they want to get a job, right? And so anyone, including those with more significant disabilities, right? Everyone deserves to at least have the opportunity to seek out a job and try to do it. And so the IU really believes in what the state calls competitive integrated employment, which despite its name, I know that name might sound like it's stress inducing due to the word competitive, but what it's referring to is remember that word integrated from before? It's about making sure that folks with disabilities, including those who have like low to moderate to high support needs, um, can be at a job and in a non-disabled setting and not segregated or set apart in what's called a sheltered workshop, which I had friends at my church that worked in a sheltered workshop and they loved it. And I love it for them. But the thing is that those workshops often pay people what's called sub-minimum wages. So for you guys in New Jersey, you're lucky. The minimum wage is probably higher for you. But in Pennsylvania, it's $7.25 an hour. But the sub-minimum wage is somewhere between $1 and $3 an hour, I think. And so I want us all to imagine for a minute if you were at a job and your employer just wanted to pay you $1 an hour. And imagine if you had to support yourself on $1, could you do it? Probably not, right? It's even hard to support yourself on $7.25 an hour, let alone $1 an hour. Um, but the reason why these folks are paid sub-minimum wage is due to a provision in federal law in the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is called Section 14C. It gives businesses the opportunity to apply for for a certificate, which basically is an agreement with the government where they say, we are certified to hire people with significant disabilities, and we're going to have them do jobs like um, most of the time, people with disabilities, they get jobs like they work on packaging items, or they might do janitorial work, or they might do dishes in a restaurant um, or grocery market. They might do like they might work at a thrift store. Um, well, actually, that's all competitive integrated employment. But for the sheltered workshop, um, the the folks that I was friends with would do packaging, and they all loved it. They all loved it because they were in community with one another, and they all had similar disabilities, and they felt that was great. And the parents loved it too. And I had said to one of the parents, though, like, what do you think about that sub minimum wage? That doesn't sound good. And she said, well, I think it's okay because my son's social security check that he gets with disability benefits, it it makes up for the lack of wage. But the state is currently, what they want to do is make it so that they get paid the regular minimum wage along with their social security check, right? Because that's what a non-disabled person would receive, or at least someone that is working competitive integrated employment, right? You would get regular minimum wage, and if you had a disability in which you were on Social Security, you would get that too. So we're trying to level the playing field here. But these parents were they were not happy because this the state was trying to shut the sheltered workshops down, in which their children, who are now adults working, they would lose that sense of community with their peers. They would lose that sense of inclusion and belonging, although um, this was in a segregated employment setting. I think the answer here is to give people the choice, to give people the autonomy to say, do they want to work in a sheltered workshop or do they want to pursue competitive integrated employment, to give them all of their options with employment and to just pay them well and to make sure that the sheltered workshop is not sheltered, right? The problem is not the workshop. It's the fact that it's a sheltered workshop. It's segregated away from non-disabled people. So if these workshops operated like real businesses, if they were held to the same standard as a real um, competitive business, then I think it would be okay. But that's just my personal view. There are many others who would advocate for shutting down the sheltered workshops altogether or keeping them open and sheltered. So as you get in the community, you'll hear different people's perspectives. But the IU believed in competitive integrated employment. So I was at an elementary school at one point working with an adult who did various tasks like setting up activities for the children at the table. He would sweep the classroom floor. He would get the snacks ready. He would do these tasks that were basic. Chick-fil-A, I had a a student who would sweep the floors there, and he would just walk around in a circle for 3 hours, sweeping floors, letting customers in, and when I was at a senior center, I worked with someone who would wipe down tables by by wiping them down with soap and water. Literally, we didn't even use like Clorox spray. We just used soap and water. He would sweep the floors. He would take the trash out. What you'll notice with a lot of these jobs for people with disabilities is that the tasks that they are asked to do are very basic in nature. And so what this does is it creates a feeling of like for the person who's doing the job, like, gee, wow, this is all I'm doing, right? And for the parent, they'll they will be professional and they'll be nice to you, but there's an underlying current of sadness. I remember looking into the eyes of one mother, and her son was intellectually disabled, and I could just tell that she was sad and that she was a terrific caregiver, but she was exhausted. And just there was a feeling of like they were trying to make it a happy thing, but there's an underlying current there of sadness. And sometimes what professionals do when they're job coaches or when they're in these what are called human service professions is they call the individuals that they work with their clients, quote unquote. And there was a time where I would do this too. But if you study, because I know at one point in this class, Identity and Justice, Dr. Wolfensberger was cited here in one of the lectures. And I had learned about him at a previous university too, where I actually met the professor that, and I'm friends with the professor that actually recorded all of Dr. Wolfensberger's lectures and put them on the internet for the world to see. And so Dr. Wolfensberger talks a lot about his theory of social role valorization for people with with intellectual disabilities. But I think that his theory has the potential to be broadly applied to people of of all abilities. It doesn't have to be just intellectual disability. But if you read about him and if you read his work, the whole premise of the theory is that it's rooted in the human rights model. And the whole point is that we don't want to be calling people clients. We don't want to reduce people to that client and staff type relationship. What happens a lot of the time is like with these job coaching gigs, they would start and they would end. And for people with these disabilities, I know one individual in particular was getting to be in a friendship with me basically, and he was viewing me as his friend. But the mother knew that I wasn't in a friendship capacity. I was an employee for the for the IU. And so it's unfortunate because some of these folks don't know that their staff member is just an employee. And as friendly as they will be with the individual, and I still consider myself friends with him, but just with the formality of it, I was a professional providing a human service. And so what happens is that when the relationship gets cut off, it's sad for the individuals and for their families that really want their son or daughter to have, true friendships and true connections. And what happens is when they don't have these friendships and connections, um, they they s- they start to um, like the quality of their life deteriorates, and they might even begin to make up stories of, you know, being friends with important people. Um, and so it's just an interesting part of things, but it's not merely interesting for the people who are living it, right? Like this is their life, and for their caregivers and for their parents, that's how they feel. But the whole point is that the IU is here to provide support. And so by giving these folks an opportunity to be employed like like everyone else, then they feel like they belong in their community. And one of my students was featured in the IU's Monday Moments newsletter for exceeding expectations and making a positive impact in the senior center. They loved how he was socializing with them. One of the things I would do as his job coach is I would go beyond what was required. And I would make sure that he was doing his job, which is great. But I would also give him some verbal cues, some verbal prompts, or what they're called, of like, hey, why don't you ask this person for this item that you need? Like instead of having me do it, I would have him do it. Or why don't you go over and talk to this senior citizen or say hi or and what ended up happening was he was begin my he was beginning to socialize a lot. And he even saw one of the senior citizens um and he was chatting with him and like they like all the seniors they loved him. And when it was his last day at work, they all like one of them made an announcement and they clapped for him, like they gave a big applause for him. which I want us all to think about that. Imagine if when you're leaving your job, your coworkers applauded you at the end. Now, this did happen. I saw one day when I was at the Apple store, apparently that's something that they do. And so when an employee says that they they're resigning, all of the other employees clap for them as they walk out, which is awesome. But if we add disability into the mix, what does this mean for this one student, right? The seniors, right? They were doing a nice thing, and like I was applauding too. I was really happy for him that he had such a positive experience. But I think as disability advocates, we need to also understand what's the underlying feeling. The underlying feeling is that if he wasn't disabled, he would not be applauded. And so is the applause good or not? And I think that's a question that we can wrestle with a little bit. Because, if the applause is done for all employees, right, like it's done at the Apple store, um, and we're using what's called universal design in what we do, which is if we do something for someone with a disability, we'll do it for everyone. Or if we're doing something for the non-disabled employees, we'll do it for the disabled employees. That's what needs to happen. So I was also blessed to be an integrated studies coach at Millersville University because I had I had attended there for one semester. And my job was to attend classes with this student and to assist with timely completion of homework, which meant I was not the one doing the work, but I was just making sure that it got done and and also that this individual was understanding the homework and what he was learning in class. And I was hoping at least that it was beneficial for them. And so I was working with someone with an intellectual disability, and I, along with my colleagues, were trying to make the university experience enjoyable and accessible. The tricky part is that with an intellectual disability, as you're attending a college class, there are many things that are difficult to understand unless they're delivered in what's called plain language, which is a a form of language that does not use jargon or academic sounding words or technical terms. So, even the name of this course, Identity and Justice, right? If we were to deliver it in plain language, we'd have to change the name of this course. We'd have to change a lot of what's written in this course's curriculum to make it so that the wording is more simple. So perhaps we could say, um, ins instead of identity and justice, I might change the name to you and me and what's right and wrong, right? Because that's basically what we're talking about. But see, the tricky part about plain language is not to reduce the meaning of what's being said. So maybe that course's title, it might not get to the core of like, okay, what does identity mean and what does justice mean? Right? Because those are big ideas. And with plain language, we don't want to reduce them so that it's more basic and less detailed or meaningful. And so the challenge with being with being an academic coach with folks with intellectual disabilities was I wasn't sure, and neither were the professors really, on how to teach the curriculum so that the person was learning everything. But the point was that there were four pillars to the integrated studies experience. So not only was it about academics, but it was also about the person's social development and as well as their vocational development. And and also their ability to live independently. And so I think that programs like this, which are called post-secondary inclusive education programs, which are funded by a federal grant called TIPSID, Transition Post-Secondary Inclusive. Um, what does the D stand for? I forget. But the point of these programs is to give someone with an intellectual disability the fullness of the college experience. So they can be a part of a class, they can take courses for the same amount of time that a non-disabled college student would, but they would just audit the classes so that this way they can learn in the way that they learn. And they can also be with other students and socialize. They can join clubs and activities. They can live in one of the dorms, and they can also get an internship at the end at whatever employer they want that can best s support them. And so that is why I support programs like integrated studies, although I do want the university community to consider how can we integrate universal design into what we do so that this way content is delivered with more plain language. I know it's difficult because I'm not even sure how we can do that well. And it's a tough question, but I think that with there being so many talented and wise people within the disability studies community, whether it's self-advocates, parents, professors, other faculty, maybe we can figure something out. I think that would be interesting to think about. And as part of being at Millersville, I've been involved with them for several years, and they have something called their Disability Pride Day. And so this is a picture of me next to a friend of mine in their Disability Pride Parade, which I just think is so awesome, where we were walking around campus, looking at what was inaccessible and seeing what we could do to make a change. And recently, last year, we were able to meet with members of their administration, which was awesome, in letting them know about how to best foster equity and inclusion. And while at Millersville, I was also fortunate to be a fellow at the Center for Civic Responsibility and Leadership, where I was able to write a song and raise awareness about voting because there was the November 2024 election that was happening. And I was able to also meet two state officials, one of whom works in Governor Shapiro's administration, and the other works for a state senator. And we had a pizza party where we got to meet them. And so that was a really cool experience. Being able to further highlight the intersection between music and public policy and being able to engage with public policymakers um, as well. And I also came up with a list of local voting uh, locations where people could go to their local polling place near campus, and um, I made a flyer for the center. So just a variety of things. I also worked for um, the Aubrey Group as part of an internship as a research analyst, where I was trained on how to find information for grants, whether they were local, state, or federal grants, whether they were provided as part of a nonprofit or as part of a foundation, for different clients that we had in New Jersey who were looking for money to support whatever initiatives they were working on. We worked with, various counties and townships. We worked like they have different organizations as well that um, seek out their services, and so that was just really cool to learn how to find grants. And in addition to being in C2P2 at Temple, I was fortunate to be a self-advocate co-mentor for the next year's class of self-advocates who were taking the class. And the mentor program came about because I had mentioned this idea to my professor, and I was saying, like, well, wouldn't it be cool if the folks with disabilities in the class had a mentor that could support them with whatever they needed help with? So I was able to play a role in the creation of this program, and my professor wrote the proposal that the state approved. We got funding for it, and I was able to do a variety of things, including giving people advice on legislative advocacy. And um, we hosted virtual check-ins where the self-advocates could log on to Zoom and they could ask for any help on their homework. They could get to know each other, sort of like a disability pride club setting. They could um, just play games and hang out. Like it was really cool. So we had the virtual check-ins, we had the in-person meetings. The legislative day was my favorite. And I also got to meet other parents as well and other professionals who were lecturing. And it's just a really good thing to have self-advocates, parents, and professionals all together in the same room, collaborating on how to support folks. Because um, I think it's important for young people to hear parents' perspectives and for parents to hear young people's perspectives, because oftentimes in the disability community, there is a underlying current of there being a debate between like self-determination versus dignity of risk. Self-determination means that a person with a disability should be able to make choices that are in alignment with their values and how they want to live their life independently. Dignity of risk is a term that refers to how, even though a person with a disability might be disabled and they might be, yeah, they might be disabled and they might not be able to do certain things, or they might be impaired in some way. But ultimately, every person, including those without disabilities, has the right to make decisions that some folks might disagree with. So, I bet so many of you have had this experience where maybe you want to do something, but maybe your parent disagrees or is not sure of whether you should do it, and you talk about it, but ultimately, as a young adult, you have to make your own decisions in order to grow in life and learn life lessons. And so this also applies to people with disabilities. And there's often a lots of discussion in the disability community between self-advocates and parents about how do we best support people to live independent lives while making reasonably good decisions. And this is at the intersection of, like, if you read in the class that we have here at William Patterson about philosophy of justice. If you read the philosopher Charles C. Mills, he discusses how feminist philosophers they they debate, like, should we emphasize autonomy as the ultimate value, or should we also blend in values of care and support? And I think in the disability community, we try to do both. So that's really cool. So as a co-mentor, I had to learn that I had to do what's called presuming competence. So you know how I said that in classroom settings, it's difficult for people with intellectual disabilities to learn the material. My thing was I wanted to just translate everything into plain language so that it would be easy for folks to understand the material, but I had to learn that, well, first of all, it's hard to translate things into plain language accurately, either using assistive technology or something else. unless it's a human being doing it. But more importantly, we should ask the person if they want something described in plain language, or we should wait for them to ask. I had to learn that presuming competence means that we presume that that the person can self-advocate for their own needs. And so, um, but anyway, that was just a cool experience to be a self-advocate co-mentor. And I've been fortunate to participate in a variety of projects and engagements across the state, just what like different panels and different activities that are happening. And uh, sometimes people reach out and ask if I want to do them. Sometimes it's my friends who ask. And sometimes it's a presentation like this, which is cool. I do need to get better at balancing projects with getting my schoolwork done on time. But I try to do as many of these as I can because they're often like once in a lifetime opportunities that don't happen again. Like they're very unique projects. So I try to do them whenever I can, although I do need to get better at being more s- being more on top of things with my original obligations in school. So I think that's a lesson for all disability advocates who are young people, right? Try to do both, but don't overwhelm yourself. And you might be wondering, like, how do I find disability advocacy activities even? Like, how do I even find these? One way to do it is to, view the disability service system as part of a flow chart. And this is a good way to understand government and public policy as well. So down here on the bottom, you have like you as as an individual, which the diagram does not show. Then you have local schools and colleges and universities. So you have high schools that might have clubs if you're in high school or you know someone who's in high school. And you have colleges and universities so that people like us can do disability advocacy. And oh, you do have individuals on the right. I forgot. And then you have regional and statewide agencies. We mentioned the Pennsylvania Technical Training and Assistance Network, or PATAN. You also have what are called Parent Education Advocacy and Leadership Centers, which it's part of federal law that each state needs to have a center for parents to learn how to advocate for their children with disabilities. So they provide assistance with school-based and transition needs for young people and their families. They teach parents about how to get an IEP and 504 and what to do if the school district doesn't want to provide you with legally mandated services, because that happens a lot. And parents gotta be fierce and they gotta advocate and be like, why aren't you providing me what you need to provide me? And oftentimes the school district doesn't want to tell you what services are available because it would be more inconvenient for them to provide you the service and spend the money, which is why you need parents to be educated and you need self-advocates who are in high school and in college to know things like this as well, especially since there's a new movement now that is taking place. I'm old as someone who's 26, so this was not a thing back when I was their age. I remember during my IEP meeting, my mom was the main one participating in it. But when I was asked a question, I was asked a question where somebody said, Christian, what life skills do you know how to do? And this might have been in the context of occupational therapy, but like they were just asking me like what independent living or what life skills do you know how to do? And do you know what my response was to that question? My response was I know how to put toast in the toaster oven and make my bed. That's crazy for someone who's in middle school and high school to not know how to do other life skills at that age, right? Because compared to our non-disabled peers, our non-disabled peers at that age, developmentally speaking, know how to do a lot more than just make their bed and put toast in the toaster oven. And so what I needed was for the school district to say, hey, Christian, guess what? The Office of Vocational Rehabilitation at the state level offers what are called pre-employment transition services, which means that as you're a child in the school system, you're getting educated so that this way you can get a job later. But because you have a disability, you need to learn a lot more of those visual spatial skills that most jobs are based on. Because if you think about it, most jobs, like whether it's working at Chipotle, working at Dunkin' Donuts, working at Lowe's, Home Depot, any place that you want to work, um, except for very unique settings like a college or university or other part of what's called the information economy. Like those jobs require a high level of education and for people to share and disseminate knowledge. But there's four levels of the economy. Uh, the fourth one is the only one that I know. It's called the information sector. But when you go down the bottom, well, not the bottom, but like if you start out at a what's called a low skill job, but I think that's not a true term. I think these jobs do involve skill and they do have dignity to them. Every job is worth having. Every job is one where you have dignity because you are working. You are a working man, a working woman, right? You have a job and it's valuable. So don't listen to the people when they say it's a low skill or low skill workers. Those workers um, probably know a lot more than the people at the top, but I digress. So in order to get a job um, at one of the other levels in the economy, it's mostly based on much how many visual spatial skills you intuitively know. And so what the school district should have said to me was, Christian, you need a lot more support than just OT, PT, and speech. We have to help you find a career that you can do because if we don't, you're not going to be able to make money and support yourself. So you're disabled and you need support systems around you. So that's what your state's Office of Vocational Rehabilitation is supposed to do because vocational refers to jobs and rehabilitation refers to if you're disabled, whether temporarily, um, if someone has an injury, then they can rehabilitate and they can learn job skills and they can go back to work. If someone's permanently disabled, it means that within the limits of their disability, they can find a job, which then rehabilitates their life and they can make money. And yeah, we covered what technical training and assistance means for school district. We covered parent centers. Then there's in my state, it's called the Office of Developmental Programs, which developmental um, refers to developmental disability, but it's within the context of autism and intellectual disability for this office. But if you read in the William Patterson's Disability and Public Health class, in the book, it talks about the Developmental Disabilities Act. And the law defines developmental disability more broadly. And even more broadly than that, the law defines disability in many different definitions. There's almost like 30 different definitions of disability that have not yet been synchronized into one legally. But but the point is that this ODP office helps people with autism and intellectual disability with getting services and supports that they need. And they can get what's called a waiver. A waiver means that instead of living in a residential setting, which it kind of like that's a euphemism for instead of living in an institution for people with disabilities, where a century ago there used to be an institution here in Pennsylvania called Pennhurst, which is where parents would unknowingly they would drop their kids off at this institution to commit them to this institution. And inside of Pennhurst, the conditions were abhorrent. They were they were abusive conditions. They were awful. People were chained to their beds, living in their own feces. They were malnourished. They were, um, and what's interesting is that this institution had staff members, and these staff would treat these folks with disabilities so poorly. And I often think about how if I lived 100 years ago in the 1900s and I had different parents and a different family, I might have been put into that institution myself. And so disability is very political. It's it's a matter of life and death in terms of how the society treats you. And so the reason why the waiver programs are so critically important and so awesome is that you get what are called home and community-based services, which means that you waive, and like I know this sounds weird, and I wish that there was another way to explain this without sounding odd, but you're waiving your right to live in an institution, which, if you think about it, having the right to live in an institution, I don't know if that's a good right to have. Like, I don't know if that's a good civil right to have, but society tends to think that, we got to just dump the disabled person over here, and that's what we're trying to fight against. So, home and community-based services enable someone to live in their home with their family, their non-disabled family members, their non-disabled neighbors outside, and just within the broader community. So you should see people with disabilities at the grocery store, at the doctor's office, at the insurance office, at at the college, at the university. You should see them, uh, living in apartments. You should see them, you know, doing things. And so, um, what a waiver does is not only does it give them OTPT speech and different forms of therapy, like you can get art therapy, you can get music therapy, but you can also get an aid, you can get um, there are so many services and supports available to make sure that people with disabilities can live with dignity. And so now that we've gone over the local and regional and statewide levels, then you have the nationwide level. And, and so at the top, right, like we have federal funding, nationwide funding that is funding all of these different programs and initiatives. Currently, that federal funding may not be coming as easily as it was before. It might be cut off for right now, which is why as disability advocates, we have to pay close attention to when civil rights violations occur. For example, recently at the U.S. Department of Education, which oversees a federal law called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, ensures that each and every child, regardless of whether they have a disability, well, or wait, no, wait, it's children with disabilities, The law ensures that children with disabilities can receive what is called a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, F-A-P-E. That is a legal term. And these children with disabilities deserve to go to any public school that they choose, that's within their zip code, or that they choose, whether it's a public school, whether it's a charter school, a cyber charter school, which I went to two cyber charters growing up. Um, the law ensures that you can go to any school you want and get services and supports like therapies and other things. Right now, in the Office of Special Education in the Department of Ed, all of the people that work in that Office of Special Education that disperse funding for IDEA, that law, because there has to be somebody in the government that authorizes the money to be distributed for services for all of these districts on the federal level, because the federal level often, the federal government um, gives you a larger percentage of the funding compared to the state level. So all of the people that work in that Office of Special Ed have been fired. And so what it means is that the IDEA law funding is not being dispersed, at least as far as I know. So what's happening is that because the IDEA law is not being enforced by those people in that office, the school district, some school districts, I've heard, at least anecdotally, on social media, um, although it has not been proven. That's one school district, or some districts in particular, are firing special education teachers because there's no government oversight of these districts anymore. And so that's why disability advocacy is important, because these children are being disadvantaged. But anyway, what I have on this chart here is an organization called the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the collaborative, or what's called NTAC-C. Basically, it's a nationwide organization that provides what we covered earlier, technical training and assistance for self-advocates, parents, districts, anyone, any professionals that work with people who have disabilities. So, I know that this has been a super long video and presentation, a lot longer than Dr. Sebti's, which I do apologize for the length, but I do think all of this stuff is pretty cool and I love it. I'm super passionate about it. But we're finally going to conclude this video. So I just wanted to take a moment as I was thinking about what I wanted to share in this presentation. I just want to give you guys some advice as my fellow classmates and as disability advocates yourselves in your own right. All of you are disability advocates just by nature of being here, just by learning. You are a disability advocate. And so I just wanted to say that for those of you that might be majoring in disability studies because you have a disability yourself and you want to be an advocate, I would encourage you to take your time in exploring your disability identity and how it may intersect with other identities you have, because we've spoken at length about intersectionality in this class throughout the various modules. Um, and this took me 17 years to figure out that I was just disabled, right? So it might take you longer if you have intersecting identities or multiple identities. I would encourage you also to take notice of how disability affects how you view the world, because this will help you tell your story. So I know for me, in non-disabled settings, socially, I don't feel like I fit. But when I'm with other disabled people, I feel like I fit in. So that's one example of how I view the world around me. Um, Also, find a group of people with disabilities at a college or university. like a disability pride club. And my goal is to start the disability pride club next semester. So I hope that some of you would want to join me in that. That would be awesome. Um, and I'll do this in between getting schoolwork done, obviously. And the same is true for all of us. Um, I would say take the time to meet and speak with people that you wouldn't normally speak to. Go to your office hours for example, for professors. I know at William Patterson, each of the professors are free to meet with you by appointment, but sometimes at other universities, professors have just office hours where you can come into their office at random and you can say, "Hi, I want to talk to you about," and it could just be anything. It could be about the class, it could be about um, just an opportunity, but it could just be about anything. It could be you just wanting to get to know the professor, or you just wanting to talk about something you learned and that you thought was cool. Just try to start any conversation because any conversation is valuable. And it helps you along your journey, your college and career journey, but most importantly, building relationships with people is what matters most in life. So th that leads me into the next thing. Don't be afraid to randomly reach out to someone, just anybody in your field. It could be somebody at William Patterson, it could be at a different organization, it could literally be anywhere, even somewhere out of state, or just reach out to anybody that you find inspiring. Like if you're working on a project, reach out to somebody, share. If you want to network or collaborate with someone on a project, reach out to them. Even if they are a highly educated expert, um, that's cool. You can learn from them, right? Don't let someone's level of education or expertise deter you, even if you're a young person, because if you're a young person that says, "Hi, so and so, I want to learn from you because I think what you do is really cool. Can we meet? Can we talk on the phone for 15 minutes? Can we meet on Zoom? Can we talk?" That's how networking happens, and that's how you move forward and make a difference. So the best things come from you reaching out. And it is okay to sometimes not feel disability pride, even in the midst of affirming who you are. I want that to be made known. I know we read in one of the earlier modules about Lydia XZ Brown, how she's a disability activist that wrote about our conceptions of cure and what does the intersection of disability and cure of disability represent, and how does that manifest or take place in a advocacy community or she said like an activist community? How do different people feel about it? And there's people that say that it's okay to want your disability cured, and there are others that would say that we should fully embrace the social model and not seek a cure, especially since cure can be as can be eugenic. If cures are mandated by a government, it can take away your self-determination and autonomy over your own body and your own mind and your own life. But as Lydia XZ Brown wrote, it is okay to want your disability to be no longer disabling. It's okay. Um, there are days where even though I am proud of who I am as a disabled person and how that disability identity has made my life worth living and filled with purpose, um, there are days where I think about, like, if I was not disabled, I'd love to be a captain of a basketball team. And I know that might sound kind of random, but I've always liked basketball. And even though I love riding my bike on beautiful sunny days, I've always loved basketball. I've loved shooting hoops. And whenever I play, because of the spasticity of my leg muscles and just my overall lack of coordination due to gross motor skill deficits, non-disabled people would trounce me um, in a basketball game. And even just something as simple as like when you're out with your friends and a fun song comes on, like, and there's a dance that goes along with the song, I dance in the wrong direction. Um, Not on purpose, but just because that's how my brain views it. Because dancing is a visual spatial activity. You have to be seeing what you're doing and you have to be oriented to the environment and you have to know the dance moves. And so I'm dancing in the wrong direction, or whenever I was growing up in a youth group setting at church and they would play a game, and I was on a team, I would be running in the opposite direction and I would score goals for the opposing team. And like people would think that that was great and they would laugh, not at me, but like in a positive way, like, yay, we just scored a point. But like it's these, for especially for people with mild disabilities, it's these little things that add up over time. And so I think it's okay to sometimes not feel like disability is this great and glorious thing. Sometimes it's hard. And but always remember that, you know, you are amazing just as you are. And there's a reason why you are the way you are, whether you're disabled or not. And it's because you're meant to be here for a purpose. You are meant to be here to contribute to the world in some way, or just to contribute to others and contribute to yourself. You know that it is okay to feel a variety of ways, but always come back to, um, I know this might be easier said than done, depending on the significance of the disability or the severity of it. But I would just encourage people to think, as Dr. Wolf Wolfensberger would say, what's my valued social role? And really just more broadly, like why am I here? As Billie Eilish would say, what was I made for? And maybe don't think as deeply as Billie Eilish about it, but just think about it in a happy way. Like I'm here for a reason. My life has value, and I'm proud of that. Even if my disability gets in the way sometimes. So lastly, I would just encourage you all to find ways to enjoy life and have fun, but most importantly, as we're learning in this class, in identity and justice. Never be afraid to stand up for yourself and others. Never. As an advocate, there are going to be times where you have to stand up for something that's right, even if other people don't. There have been cases where I've had to do that. Even in disability settings, where the professional in charge is supposed to know better, but they don't. They may not include folks. They may not do what they're supposed to do in accordance with our values. And so, there have been times where I've had to say, like, that's wrong and that's not just. And we got to change that. So, never be afraid to stand up for yourself and others, um, because once you do, you'll know that you've made a difference, um, and you'll never regret that. And yeah, so always advocate, But just enjoy life, have fun, learn as much as you can in classes like this one. And yeah, thanks again to Dr. Subti for this opportunity to share. And I hope that I get to meet some of you, whether it's on Zoom or face to face at William Patterson, or just somewhere along the way in the disability community, whether it's in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, anywhere else. Um, I I hope to see you guys soon. Know that what works in advocacy is forming connections with individuals, organizations like colleges and universities, religious institutions, doing all this stuff on the local level matters. Um, and and yeah, go just, you know, and most importantly, I forgot to put on this slide, truly love people because as a disability advocate in the community, we want people who are really loving and really compassionate and really kind and just empathetic and joyful. That's who we need in the community. And I know that each and every one of you um, is just a lovely person, just by nature of being here. So keep up the great work, everybody, and hopefully I will talk to you guys all soon. Bye.